What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of 10x Recruiting brought to you by MetaView. I got Sile, the CEO of MetaView. What's up, Sile?
I'm good, man. How you doing?
Today, we talked to Greg Garrison, who runs recruiting at Coinbase. This conversation is like one of my favorites. Greg is such an elite thinker when it comes to talent and people.
Elite thinker for sure, but I guess my big takeaway was elite doer. People fall into recruiting, yada, 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 which I think sometimes people say in a little bit of almost like self-defeating way. Many folks who are successful recruiters had no grand plan to get into recruiting. What you'll hear from Greg is that they got hired for a reason and they succeeded for a reason. He knew what he was looking for and he was looking for exceptional talent. There's a reason why some people do great. And if you listen to Greg and he runs through his sort of rubric for it, that will make it clear that there's a plan somewhere. Someone has the plan, and that's why many people end up in recruiting. And then the other thing was, I think some people, when they hear leaderboards, they can think it's a little bit inhuman, a little bit sort of factory-esque, for a team. But then when you combine that with the sort of Coinbase's reputation around really focusing on performance and talent density, I think there's just this interesting line to tread. But how do you achieve high performance without sort of being callous towards the people who are actually in the company, while also thinking, how do you help people build up resilience? Because you need that in recruiting.
And I think specifically about the leaderboard is only putting the leaders on the board and not putting the entire organization on the board. The other one I loved is how he assesses recruiters, right? So one of the most frequent questions I get from founders, heads of people, heads of talent is, how do I assess great recruiters? What is like kind of the common thread between the top performers on the leaderboard and what you assess for? And the thing he said is that some sort of competitive background. And that has been so true for me as I reflected back on it. Of the best recruiters I've worked with have had something. And it's not just sports. Like, I played sports. That's one thing. But like, I've worked with concert pianists. I've also worked with people who came from abject poverty and like they were competing to get out of that life. Something competitive must be true within them. And that, I think, as I reflect back on everyone I've ever worked with, that's always a trait of the top performers.
I reckon actually competitiveness in many ways is a subset of something else. How does this person identify themselves, basically? Maybe that's literally what competitiveness means, but I think you might find other avenues where you see, hey, this person clearly identifies as someone who expects to do well in their work or has demonstrated that that's very important. When they go to bed at night, they're either thinking about, how do I do better tomorrow? Or they're thinking, God, glad that day's over and, I'll worry about tomorrow.
So you guys are going to love this episode. Craig he's awesome. And it's been one of my favorite episodes yet. So enjoy this episode of 10X Recruiting brought to you by MetaView with Greg Garrison. This is 10X Recruiting, a podcast from MetaView. Let's get after it. All right. Greg Garrison, thanks so much for coming on the show today, man.
My pleasure, Nolan. Thank you for having me.
So I remember back at Google when I was a child and I was like trying to learn from really smart people. You were one of those people. I couldn't get in touch with you though, because you were like the Austin guy. And Austin was like blowing up at this point in time. So what is the story of like that Google office and like how did Google Austin come to be with you there?
You've just made my month, Nolan. I love talking about this. It was an honor in my career. We had a charter to hire 100 recruiters in 90 days, which we crushed, and we did. And then over the course of the next few years, we kind of moved Google's North America recruiting operations centralized to Austin. I mean, by the time I left Google, we had hired well over 1,000 recruiters, sourcers, and recruiting coordinators.
Oh, you hired over 1,000. Okay. So like when people hear this, I think the initial thing that they're going to think is like, well, quality must have been bad. And like, yeah, like you can hire 1,000 people really fast. But actually, that was never my experience. Like, I think we hired elite talent there. And candidly, like a lot of those people now are like running their own talent shops at other like really name brand companies. So how did you hire that many people while also keeping the bar high?
There was a cost play in Austin. I mean, most expensive place in North America to do business is probably the Bay Area. So we were shifting it out of the Bay Area. But it was all for naught, Nolan, unless the productivity per resource was equal to or better than the other recruiting operations. And so at the end of the day, we hired incredibly high talent, and productivity per resource was through the roof high in Austin. So we did the volume game, the bar was high, and in the end, the operation was a success. There were so many pivotal moments in my career that like set me up. I was an entrepreneur, right? I was a builder. And so like everyone, it's like I stumbled into recruiting. Nobody says, hey, when I grew up, I want to be a recruiter. You either stumble into it early, you stumble into it later. I was in sales. I stumbled into recruiting, specifically agency recruiting. My big clients were Dell and Advanced Micro Devices. They basically said, "Hey, stop charging us agency fees. Come in house." And so I had learned agency. I had learned internal corporate hiring in a corporate environment. And then the builder mindset that I think played well into the Google launch of the Austin. Just the entrepreneurial spirit burning inside. Like I one day walked down to the county courthouse and filed a DBA, Greg Garrison, doing business as startup staffing, and I founded my own recruiting firm. Despite me, it was pretty successful. We were acquired. I stayed on 2 years on this employment agreement. I see in the ERE, Nolan, the electronic recruiting exchange, that Google is hiring recruiters. And so my whole thing is like, I'm going to go sell to, like, we were kind of like a micro, an RPO. And so I was going to go sell to Google. Google basically said, after multiple conversations, and I'm thinking, man, I'm about to close a big deal with Google. They basically said, "Hey, Greg, we're not going to buy from you. However, you should come join us and you should build this internally." And it was basically sourcing and growth. And so I started, in Austin. I was one of the first, if not the first person here in Google Austin. Google had a very decentralized recruiting model, Nolan. So it's like, you probably remember there were recruiters in Seattle and SoCal and Denver and Chicago. Like I see to the Austin office. The charter was growing up to like 12 people, 10, 12 people. But there was a pivotal moment where Laszlo, CHRO at one point, and then Sunil, vice president of talent, basically had me swing by and said, "Hey, we're going to launch, recruiting operations in Middle America, right? And we're looking at Denver, we're looking at Atlanta, Chicago, and Austin." And then gave me this wisdom of, we don't grow around leaders, but we need leaders in place to grow around. Now the charter is put the center of the universe here from Google recruiting, hire 100 recruiters in 90 days. And so the very first thing I did is I recruited internally. And what I mean by that is if you had to hire 100 recruiters, the span of control or my student to faculty ratio had to be in check. So I started looking around of like, who were the best of the best already at Google, or who on my bench would I want to bring with. And so when we showed up in Austin and it was time to go, I looked around and I had, 8 or 9 of like the best rock stars at Google. So we were ready to go. We were ready to hit the ground running.
There's so much to unpack there. So I think that the first thing for me is like, to your point around falling into recruiting, it's kind of like an old joke at this point in time. Like everybody says it and it's 100% true. But then I think there are qualities of like the best people that are shared. And so, when you're thinking about hiring people into this job, I think a lot of these people that you're hiring candidly like have very little recruiting experience, or potentially even have like no recruiting experience. And so what are you asking and what are you looking for when you're hiring recruiters to ensure that like these people are going to be elite when they join the building?
Yeah, but now we're getting into the meat of it. I have my own mental model of what I look for when I am hiring a recruiter, but some of it's also based on data. When you're hiring at that scale, like we would plot them out and we were looking for behaviors and traits or common denominators about what makes good recruiters. So I'll walk you through, and this isn't foolproof. It doesn't mean if you don't have one of these, you're not a great recruiter. But probably the first thing for me, and it's like when we plotted these out, like this group was top right. Super simple. This may seem obvious, but I want you to have a college education. I want you to have a degree. When we looked at the data, like those, it didn't matter if you went to Harvard or a state school, but have a degree. Like that's important to me. Doesn't mean if you don't have a degree, you're not a great recruiter, but that's one of the things that I look for. The second thing, without a doubt, is I want, if you grew up in an agency environment, recruiting agency, staffing agency, I love that experience. That was my journey. When I stumbled into recruiting, I spent 30 days in Provo, Utah in an incubator office learning how to recruit. The only thing that
Provo's
you can
great.
do.
Provo's great, by the way. It's 30 minutes away from my house. So it's like, it is
So
beautiful, to be fair.
It's gorgeous. It's gorgeous. But what I found at that point in time in life, like the only thing to do in Provo, Utah was learn how to recruit. And so it's like, but my whole point is agencies invest heavily in teaching people how to recruit. So that's one. And then there's a second component to that, Nolan, is it's not probably every experience, but a lot of agency recruiters start 100% commission, or they start on a draw of some sort, small base. You make your money if you're making hires. So I look for, if you've been at a staffing agency for more than 2 years or so, you're probably pretty good and you're making money and you're feeding your family and you're able to go to happy hours after work.
It's hard.
People
It
that
is
are,
hard work.
it's a hard work and it's a grind and it's commission based. It's like, so if I see people that are agencies for like just a few months, they're like, the signal to me is, maybe they didn't have as much success as others. But I love that education piece. I love the recruiting agency piece. This is one I'm incredibly passionate about. You kind of have to suss this out. I love to hire recruiters that grew up in some sort of a competitive environment. And what I mean by competitive environment, what I'm after here is it's the will to win. It's the strong will. Like there's skill, hill, will, or skill, will, hill. It's like I want someone that has just this drive and this will to win. And so when we were doing all this recruiter hiring, like athletes that grew up in like the discipline, we hired Olympic athletes, we hired collegiate athletes. Doesn't have to be athletics though. One of the best recruiters I've ever hired in my career, Nolan, was a competitive ballroom dancer. So not like D1 college athlete, but phenomenal recruiter Monday through Friday, and then the weekends like hyper competitive ballroom dancer. But it's that will, right? And so I want that competitive edge. One of the things that I did, like when we were launching the site, is like we would put the top 25%. I would post it outside of my office every Monday morning. Or who's the top 25% of the recruiters on the team today?
No way. You had a leaderboard?
We had a leaderboard. And so it's like, here's a learning. I used to print the whole list, but then I don't want to shame people. It's really stinks if you show up and you're in the bottom decile. And so don't do that. But I would post the top 25%. And there was two types of recruiters. Some that never went up there to check it. They were just happy to be there. There were some that were waiting outside of my, desk or my office on Monday mornings when I posted that up there to see if they were actually on that list or not. And so like that competitive will to win is just, it's fire. It's what you want. I would talk to my team a lot, Nolan. Think about like when we starting to get up to like 50, 60, 70, 100 plus people, like people start to separate, right? Like you get a natural bell curve of recruiters, right? And so cheesy, but I called them survivors, drivers, and thrivers. And the meat of the bell curve, that's the drivers. That's where the bulk was. But these were the people who came in and they hit their OKRs. I loved them. Hit their OKRs. They drove the business forward. They were phenomenal. If you get to the right of this bell curve, I call these the thrivers. These are the people, and this, Nolan, it's like, the OKR was 3 and everyone's hitting 3, but somehow Nolan's hitting 12. Like, what the heck is Nolan doing? And so like we would break that, like these thrivers, and try to figure out like, what are they doing that is 10xing and having them crush it. I think it was will. I think it was lean in. Like they all had all the same leaders, they had all the same tools, they had all the same resources. It was their will to go and their will to win. And then on the left side of that bell curve were the survivors. And those were a bit perplexing because, like I said, same leader, same tools, same resources. I just don't think that the will wasn't there. You get out of it what you put into it. And so with that group, coach them up, try to close any skill gaps, have them meet in the middle. But I think there's a learning as you try to move those folks out sooner than later, because it's a privilege to work at Coinbase. It was a privilege to work at Google. If you're taking up a seat for me trying to go find the next Michael Jordan to join the team, it's like you need to earn that seat. But that whole survivor, driver, thriver mentality. And then my job as a leader was to move those bars, those lines on that bell graph to the left so that we're getting more of the thrivers and more of the drivers. But I think the key component of that story is it's that whole will to win is the biggie.
Yeah, totally. And I've noticed the same thing with recruiters, and founders ask me all the time, especially when they're hiring their first recruiter, or even like recruiters that are getting promoted to, a manager or director role for the first time, which is like, how do I go find great recruiters? And I think for the most part, it's not that they're found, it's that they're made, and they have these skills that are in them from like the very earliest stages of life.
And then it's just like honing the craft, getting more reps, getting better as time goes on. Really quickly on this topic with how you measured them. And I think that there's a soundbite right now in recruiting around recruiting metrics being a little bit dangerous, specifically around like offer accepts and if there's like perverse incentives there. It seems to me that you guys have actually tried to solve this problem at Coinbase with checks and balances. What do you think about these like recruiting metrics problems, right? Like inherently, if we're shooting for more hires, right? If I'm a recruiter, right? Like theoretically, like, do I care as much about the bar being really high?
Yeah, I mean that's a fantastic question, and I don't have a silver bullet for it yet. At Coinbase, it's like talent density. So, like with
Yeah.
my team, everything is in service of talent density, right? It's like we will hire slower or we will hire less to make sure that we have very talent dense organizations. And
Yeah.
so there will be, it's like you need time, like there needs to be, you need to get through a couple of performance metrics with the talent density so we can measure it and that sort of thing. But what I love to do with recruiters is there's almost like two types of recruiter. There's one type of recruiter, like I just said, like, when you go to that leaderboard where like they're happy to be here, or it's like, how are things going? It's going great. I made a hire yesterday, and like, oh, you're great, but how's your whole pipeline? Like those recruiters can get left behind. The recruit, I think you've got to blow up your entire pipeline, right? I mean, the biggest thing that you're after is quality. And then you're
Yeah.
looking at, the volume coming in, and you're looking at the efficiency as well. But recruiters that understand their pass-through rates, and are trying to improve them, know how much work and pipeline they have to put in on the front end in order to hit their metric. Now, the controversial piece that I think that you're alluding to is I've seen recruiters not hit offer extend and the ATS because their gold or their performance is heavily reliant on their offer accept rate. So they can dodge getting a decline by just not hitting, offer extend into the,
Oh,
into the system.
interesting.
Yeah, I mean, it's like it happens, and so like what we do, it's like we have a SLA. It's like I want my offer accept rate to be above 80% or whatever it is. So it's aspirational. That's the goal. But it's like if a recruiter is not hitting offer extend because they don't want to ding their offer accept rate, then the next thing is you look at fallout. It's like, what's your overall fallout or a candidate withdrawal rate at that offer extent stage on? And so it's like, if you can get into the minutia and get into the data, you can actually tell the story. But some of the metrics, yeah, they can be gamified. I 100% with you.
Yep. So you mentioned talent density, and Coinbase has put out some really seminal pieces over the course of the last 5-6 years. This is one of them. And can you let's first start with like, what is talent density? Explain to the audience.
Yeah, I mean, it's our number one operating principle is top talent in every seat. And so talent density is we want, our population, our employee base here at Coinbase, to be as talent dense as possible. I mean, we're looking for all the 10Xers out there. And so the blog that came out that LJ threw out, I mean, there were 5 components to it. One is assessments. We do a cognitive assessment. We do a cultural assessment. Our engineers do a coding assessment. We do a COO offer approval where Brian and Emily will review offer packets before we go to offer. There are internships, like the internships we view as we've elevated the internships substantially, meaning before talent density, we had, dozens of internships. Once we launched talent density, we were like 200 internships. This next cycle, we're going to do 300, but the whole premise is internship. It's like a 12-week work trial. And we put our interns on like impactful, meaty things, and then we'll convert, the best of the best of the best. And so it's meant to be like a work trial. And then there's 2 other components that are a bit out of like the recruiting cycle. It was the real-time feedback piece, performance management. And then it was like this executive accountability for talent density. But like I said, launched a year ago. We're a year in the game, and it's fascinating. It's very cool.
I personally love this. And the reason I love it is because you guys aren't afraid to put your neck out there and say, we're going to run an experiment. This is the constraints of the experiment that we plan on running. And we're just going to go see what happens. Now, I think the world, for whatever reason, doesn't love experiments, doesn't love change. Like it kind of freaks people out in a lot of ways. And I think specifically with talent density, the cognitive assessments is the thing that got people spun around the axle. So what are those? Like, how are you using them? And then how are you using them when you make decisions on candidates?
Yeah, it's very simple. It- it's 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 very simple, Nolan. So we do a cognitive assessment, we do a cultural assessment that's aligned to our 10 cultural tenets, and then we do the coding assessment. Right? Here's the simplicity of it. It's a data point in our hiring process.
Yeah.
It's not pass fail. It's not like you passed it or you failed it. It's a data point, right? There are benchmarks by job families, and it's a data point. And so whenever we make a hiring decision at Coinbase, I mean, we're looking at the holistic candidacy, right? And I can walk you through all of that, but it's like, it's just simply a benchmark set and it's a data point, but it's not a pass fail shutdown. That takes, all of the angst out of it, or that it's not near as rigid. It's just meant to be a data point, right? What I found though, it's like there's a cultural piece to it, Nolan, is some candidates may opt out and go, goodness, I don't want to take an assessment, like not for me. And it's polarizing. And I think that that's okay. I think it's meant to be okay, right? Other candidates will say, give me those assessments. Let me show you how aligned I am to Coinbase. And I want you to look at my scores because, I'm aligned. Let's do this. Those might be the people that are more culturally aligned to Coinbase. But like, we're going to get year of data on this, 2 years data after this, 3 years. Like we'll stay in the game and get all of the proper data on it and make decisions on what we do with benchmarks and cut scores. And like, we're not going to do anything without proper data. But right now it's just simply, it's a data point in the hiring process.
Yeah. And it's interesting that it's serving as a filter for the people you want to attract, and a repellent for those that you don't, which is what I always say is like a good talent brand.
It's a hypothesis. I mean, it's like our app creates. It's a hypothesis. It's like Coinbase's talent brand, man. This place is a rocket ship, and it is like through the moon. I think we're 1.5 million applications last year with the assessments and with the talent density and with like. But it's like I think birds of a feather flock together, or smart people want to work with other smart people. It's like, I actually think after we launched talent density, it's like people like, why wouldn't I want to go work with the best of the best of the best? So like the hypothesis is people opt out. I think that's happening. But whenever we send out, I won't get into the hard data, but whenever you send out the assessments, lion's share of the people take them. There is a cohort that doesn't. We don't dive in and try to ascertain why they don't. But I do think that there is some self-selection there. I think it's a little polarizing, and I think we're okay with that.
Yeah. I also so I want to know what the assessment is, but like, I also want to know like what my score is. Like, I want to figure out like how dumb I am compared to like the rest of the population. So are you sharing the score with the candidate?
No, it's all confidential. I mean, it's nothing gets shared out. It's not pass fail. There's a benchmark set. And then it's interesting too, Nolan, is like you can set that benchmark out. I mean, you can set that benchmark super low, and it could be a filter, like screen out the bottom 20%.
Exactly.
Or you could set that thing so stinking high that hardly any people, like right now, as we gather data and try to glean, it's like it's not like this gauntlet of like, oh my gosh, I've got to be the top decile. But I think that's where it may go over time, with data, backing us on it.
Well, and that's the thing you're getting at, Greg, that I don't think people really understand, is that given the power and size of your brand, you are now leveraging it for future insights. So launching these things today doesn't mean, next week we have all the answers. It's actually more like in 10 years from now that we're looking at, all of our people that are here who have gone through these things, is there a correlation, right, between our best people and the structure that we're putting around this? The thing that I think is so fascinating around why people don't like it, these are the same people that are saying like, well, structured interviews is where we get the most data. And like, that is true. Like unstructured interviews are terrible. We all know that. But like with you guys adding structure to this, what I see that you're trying to do is to more look into the future to say, hey, the future version of ourselves is going to really wish we had this data to look back on and say, okay, now that we've figured this out, we are trying to turn hiring into a science. That is the goal. We don't want to just shoot 50-50 like everybody else.
Yeah. I mean, good things take time. And so if you think about it, Nolan, the more performance cycles that we get where you can plot, assessments and that sort of thing, the better quality of the data is going to be. And so, but we're also not naive, or we're not poor stewards of it. Like, we're not making radical decisions if the data is not, getting us, clear signal. And so
Yeah.
it will take time, and we're okay. We'll play the long run. The cultural piece alone, and we can talk a little bit about that, is I think worse. The juice is worth the squeeze on that, because it's like the culture of recruiters and hiring managers and all that sort of thing to drive talent density is palpable, and it's good and it's real. I want to comment on something. It's like when you say it's controversial, what I found as the VP of talent for Coinbase after this launch, I have never been reached out to more by CEOs,
Exactly.
CHROs, and venture capitalists. I actually block time on Saturday mornings to respond back to people or meet with the well-intended earnest people, because everybody wants to, or not everyone, but it's like people want to do what we're doing. Like, of course you want
They
to
want to
hire. Like,
learn.
talent matters. I mean, here, I'm a sports analogy guy, but it's like, college football, like Alabama and Ohio State, they win the national championship, Nolan, because they have better talent. They have great coaches, but they have more 5-star athletes than any other school, right? And so, like, my belief is like coaching or leaders can set the floor. Meaning, it's like if you don't have a very talented team, but you have a really good coach, you're going to win a few games. But talent sets the ceiling. If you want to go win the national championship, go get the best of the best athletes out there. And so, like, Coinbase with talent density is like, we want to win the national championship. So, like,
Totally.
we want to bring in the best talent on the planet. And so, there's a huge appeal. Like, I can't keep up with the people that have reached out saying, it's hard to get in the game, Greg. Like, where did y'all start? And like, how do we launch this thing,
Yeah, so I want to get to that in a little bit, but I think actually, like, we'll probably tie it in right now. But I think the other, quote unquote, controversial piece, which I candidly don't think is controversial, is that Emily and Brian, your president and
Yeah.
CEO, review every offer. So, we did this at DoorDash, and I think we did it through 5,000 employees. And so the offer review process, we instituted because Tony felt like he wasn't close enough he wasn't close enough to like the hires that we were making, and he was losing touch as we were scaling. And so when we instituted this, I remember the recruiting team being like, Nolan, like, what the fuck, man? Like, this is going to slow us down. We're going to lose candidates because of this. Like, we're not going to be able to move fast enough. And I was like, okay, hey, fair concern. Like, we'll put a 24-hour clock on it. But we're
Yeah.
going to run this experiment. What we
Yes.
found from the experiment, and I'm curious to get your learnings on this one, is that by Tony being the ultimate arbiter of the talent bar, like the final check, if you're a hiring manager, his eyes are going to be on this. And so if there is a question on the packet, on the resume, on the feedback, you better proactively answer it. And, we used to say, like, you better be willing to put your badge on the line. Now, we weren't going to fire anybody, but it was a saying that was like, ultimately, if Tony
Yeah.
asks you a question that you don't know the answer to, then you're going to feel exposed, and it's going to increase the way that you think about the talent density at DoorDash. And so I'm curious, like, have you guys found that at Coinbase?
Everything that you just said is 100% right. It's super interesting, Nolan. We were both at Google. Google did this. We had offer review on the end side where ORs would come down and shut some down for it's not like it's I think there's power. So what happens, there's power in know that I know. There's power in a big cultural shift. I can tell you right now, it's like if I know every hire is going to go to Brian and Emily. And by the way, like, they're pretty darn good at it, and they're pretty darn fair. They'll look at the holistic. I mean, like, they look at the whole. We can talk about too, like, what you look at. It's never just like one thing. Boom. You look at the holistic piece of the candidacy, and we can walk through that. But it's a major culture shift. And so the first thing that I noticed was, if you're, and this is hard, and we can talk about this too as a talent leader taking your team through it. I'm the guy that stood in front of 150 recruiters and said, we're going to go do this thing, and it's going to be really
Totally.
hard. And we can talk about that. But what I noticed is, very first candidate that we put out, day one, first candidate we put up, boom, shot down. And I mean, it gets attention. And so, but if you're a recruiter, you're very keen. Like, I'm after this candidate, and it takes me months to get them from passive to active, and then I invest all this time, money, and energy, and I get them to the goal line, and they get shut down. Horrible. It's like that doesn't feel good as a human being. So the cultural shift is, I see my recruiters trying to channel Brian and Emily. my recruiters before they ever reach out to a candidate are like, is this bar high enough? And does this increase our talent density? And it's like, do they have good career trajectory? And does their work make an impact? And, it's the holistic thing. So it's like, I think it fundamentally changed how my recruiters operated and who they engage because they want to be successful and they want to get hires. Second thing is that the hiring managers too. It's like the way hiring managers assess, it went from, man, I'm in duress, I really need to get this position filled,
Yeah.
to like, I'm sending this to Brian and Emily. I want them to know that I get talent density and I get the bar. So they up their game as well. Right. And then the last thing, and you said this, our offer packets are like the tightest I've ever seen. And we'll talk both sides. I mean, we'll call out the risk. It's like, there's no perfect candidate. I mean, it's just not. So it's like, but you will call out let me channel Emily on like what she might find or Brian might find. And you say, hey, great, 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 great. This is the risk. Oh, and by the way, this is how we would try to like overcome the risk to make this a good hire. And so I don't even have to look at data. I mean, I think the data will support all of this, but the cultural shift is just through the roof. And so it's like, I think I could look Brian, Emily, and LJ in the eyes as the head of talent and say, we're getting a lot of those 5-star blue chip recruits. It's like we're a lot better positioned to go win the national championship than, maybe we were this time last year. But you absolutely see it going top right.
Yeah. So, Jensen Huang at NVIDIA is the NVIDIA CEO, infamously said recently that he has 50 direct reports. And you got people that like freaked out about that situation. And it's applicable here because if you have layers that block you from the actual feedback from the top, like, it's like we've all played the game of telephone, like it all gets translated a little bit differently. But what I found at DoorDash is like when the recruiters are actually, and the hiring managers, by the way, both are really important, are on the front line offer review email to the CEO, and the feedback is direct, right, to the recruiter and or hiring manager and or interviewers, which it gets that way too. It scales so much better because it's like, holy shit, Tony cares about this, or Brian and Emily care about this. Like, I'm going to apply this moving forward right away in the most serious possible way. And so it's like, it's actually the most effective way to drill culture into an organization is to make sure you have that like check and balance to where you can hear directly, from the leader to say like, this is actually what matters and what I care about.
Yeah. There's an interesting element too. It's like there is pass-through rate data that we have. And I don't, I will share the pass-through rate data at a high level, with LJ and above. But if you're a leader, it's like, and you have the lowest pass-through rate, meaning you're putting candidates up that are getting shut down at that review stage.
Totally.
I mean, it's pretty powerful for like you're saying, it's almost like as the head of talent, Eileen is like, help me help you. Like let's look at profiles, look at these reasons, let's try to find the patterns. But like there's a learning through an opportunity to improve. But it's like it's that competitive environment too. It's like everybody wants to be the leader that like, yep, I got talent density. Like, look at my pass-through rate. My people are solid. They are high. They're making it through. You don't want to be the leader where you're like, man, struggling or maybe doesn't fully get it. But those are the learning moments where you can kind of come in and you say, this is the pass-through rate. This is the patterns. This is the reason why. Here's how we're going to, recruiters are going to focus more on this. Your hiring managers need to have a keen eye on this. And then let's be super thoughtful and careful, like with who we put up so that we're like rest assured that it's going to meet the bar or, be above the bar.
Totally.
The cultural shift is real.
Yeah. And so the last piece too is, look, we're never going to get to 100% efficacy on recruiting. It's just never going to happen. Like, you're going to miss, things happen in people's lives, circumstances change. Like, we're human beings. We're very complex.
You can't bat 1,000.
You cannot, it's impossible, but we should aspire to do it. We should aspire to do it. Right. And so the thing when you include the highest leaders of the organization is now everybody has ownership when it fails. Right. So it's not just like finger pointing anymore. It's like, hey, like Brian and Emily missed this one too. And then and when I find that that's the case, right, to where you don't feel like your neck is on the line for when you miss in hiring, you're much more likely to do the work of digging into figuring out what went wrong here. What did we miss?
Yeah.
So we can apply it and move it forward and increase the batting average, which is ultimately what we're all trying to do in the game.
100%. I mean, nothing really to add there, but yeah, we look at the data, pass-through rates, we try to find behaviors, we try to find traits. We try to apply learnings back so that we're always doing this continuous improvement and continuous learning. But you don't bat 1,000. I mean, Babe Ruth struck out sometimes, right? I mean, it's like you're going to strike out sometimes. But I think with talent density, I mean, we're hitting more dingers and home runs than most people out there. It's like I sleep very well at night knowing that this is going top right for us.
Totally. Yeah. And you know, the famous quote in baseball as a former baseball player here is you fail 7 out of 10 times, you can go to the Hall of Fame. And I think for you, it's probably like, you know, trying to get it to like fail 2 out of 10 times is like the best goal.
Yeah.
But you know, well, I think we'll find out with more time. Okay. Last topic, Greg, is I want to talk about work trials. So you had put out a blog, I believe you or LJ had put out a blog about interviewing at Coinbase. And I love this for a lot of reasons. Like it demystifies the hiring process for people. It gets like really clear on what you guys are optimizing for, what it's going to be like for a candidate, you know, kind of does the like, hey, you opt in or opt out thing, which we talked about earlier, which is great. But one of the things in there that I don't think you guys have talked a whole lot about is work trials. And you just mentioned it earlier with interns as well. And so my belief has always been the best way to get signal on somebody is actually to like sit down and work with them. And the longer you can work with them, the higher signal you're going to have. How are you guys designing work trials by role and department? And what is that process like? How do you work with the hiring managers? Like what, give me the work trial thing. Like, how do you do it?
Yeah. I mean, so my opinion is we get the greatest signal on these work trials. I believe more so than structured interviewing. The interns is like you get 10 weeks of game film on them. I mean, you know the ones that separate and you know the ones that are good. We try to recreate that. So like the history of work trials at Coinbase, it predates me. But I think in the early days, I'm talking like Series A, Series B, I think Brian had like 3-month work trials, meaning when he was growing the business, before senior leaders would join, they would basically consult with the company for 90 days or however long it was. And Brian's whole deal is like, I get to be in the trenches with them. I get to see how they work. I get to see how we jam on things. And so it was very common and they were very lengthy. And I think some of the best leaders that we have at Coinbase actually came through those lengthy work trials. And so Brian is huge advocate of work trials. So it's like, we knew work trials, we don't want them to go away. So the way that we structure a work trial is, I'll try to give you an example of like one for my team, Nolan. And so the recruiters, like we create, like sample work trials that hiring managers can select from, or the recruiter will actually work with the hiring manager to create a work trial. But I'll give you one. Like if I'm hiring a recruiting manager, or let's say I'm hiring a director of recruiting under me, the work trial process would be I would give them a situation. So the way the work trial works is you give them a situation, they have to solve it, and then they come back and present it to the team, and the team jams on it together with them. But like an example would be suddenly we had to move, or we think we need to move 500 heads to an international site. Can you write a PPS? This is part of like our DNA at Coinbase. It's called problem, propose, solution. I probably write 3 or 4 of these a month. But if you come across, something that you have to go achieve or a problem, you write this one page where it's problem, and then the proposed solutions are like super succinct. But the work trial would be like, let's say you got to move 500 heads internationally, and then it's like write the PPS, and then you're going to come in and present it to the team, and we're going to jam on it. But in this little exercise alone, Nolan, I can give them a situation. I can see their problem-solving skills of like how they would go about, what location they would select internationally and why. I would get to see the solutions that they come up with. I get to see their writing skills, which are very important to Coinbase.
Totally.
It's like, did they write a pretty succinct 1-page doc? And then like they write it and then they would send it out like, 2 or 3 days before. And then it's the team, like they would come in and present. And so the solution, the paper and the solution, the team, I would get to see their presentation skills. I would get to see like how influential they are. Did they anchor to their solution and have conviction and like their influence? And then you get to see how they collaborated with the team. Like we jam on it for 45 minutes and they have to make assumptions. I mean, it's like, it's not like, it's not perfect, but you jam on them and you ask questions and that sort of thing. at the end of those, Nolan, I can say, man, I think they really missed the metric piece. Like it's like I don't think this is a great solution, and they didn't back it by any data or presentations like what I'm trying to figure out like what's my hard no and what I can coach and like take a risk on and like improve. But some of them come in and you're like, I want that person on the team. Like that was so darn good, and like they will make us better. Let's go. But I get more signal off of work trials than I do just about anything else.
Yeah, and like, so I've been an advocate of these for years, and I think the reason why is because one, it's like the higher signal for us if we're interviewing. The other is the higher signal for the candidate, right? Like they're going to
100%,
sit down with
100%.
the team and kind of go through the gauntlet a little bit, but they're going to see how the team interacts, how the team communicates, how the team delivers feedback. And for us, my favorite thing, because it's really hard to replicate this in other aspects of the interview process, is how does the candidate respond to feedback? Like that is one, like nobody's perfect, to your earlier point. We're all works in progress. And so like we just need to be able to communicate openly and honestly. And it always shows up in these things. When I got my offer at Carta, I haven't told this story before, but when I got my offer at Carta, I had like 5 interviews and they were like, oh, like we want to hire you. And I was like, that's crazy. Like you don't know shit about me. I don't know shit about you. And so literally as the candidate, I designed
Yeah,
my own work trial, which was I built
it's
a
amazing.
model. I built a model for like what the people team should look like based off of headcount numbers. And it was like very, very simple, but I was like, I want to do this. I want to sit down with the exec team and I want you guys to come in and like pick this apart, because ideally, like once we set this in stone, like obviously things can move around, but like this is going to be the foundation that we use moving forward. And so I did that. And then, obviously you sit down, the CFO always is with like a microscope on these things. And he's like, 1 to 150 for HRBPs. And I was like, that one was like a little bit lower. Like maybe but ultimately it opens up the dialogue to see how we're going to work with these people. And there's literally there's no better signal in the hiring process than the work trial.
That story is legendary. That is like, I love that story. It's like, I'm the candidate. Let me create a work trial so I can get sick. It's so true because it's reciprocal. Like you're assessing, they're
Exactly.
assessing you, you're assessing them. I'll tell you, like also a learning, and this is great for other talent leaders, but it's like never take a job, a head of talent job or a recruiting job, unless you can get exposure to CEO, COO, or that exec team. And so, and here's why. It's
Regular
throughout my
exposure.
career. Yeah, but I'm saying in the interview process, I
Oh, interesting.
before I came to Coinbase, I'm like in 4 years. I talked to Brian Armstrong. Like that was part of like, because as the head of talent, I'm selling Brian. I'm selling that mission and that vision. But what I've learned throughout my career is that the senior leaders, they're either going to view, I can almost determine the success of the business, future looking, based on senior leadership's view of talent and recruiting. They're either going to do recruiting as HR administrivia and a necessary evil, like we got to go hire 100 people, or they're going to view it as game changing. Let's create an unfair competitive advantage. Let's go. And if you're the head of talent, like I got the best job in all of TA because Ryan, Emily, and LJ, like our number one operating principle is top talent in every seat. And so some days, Nolan, it feels like I'm probably flying a little too close to the sun, but I never question like that. They care immensely, and we will chase this down and win together. But if you're going to lead recruiting, for a company or for any entity, it's like you got to sell those leaders, and you have to know that it means something to them. We were revamping our career site and making it a little edgy and making it more like, it like channel, like what's it like to work at Coinbase. And we did this last year and I was sharing it with Brian. He leaned in so hard and cared so much about content on our career site. I don't know if other CEOs are going to go do that, but it's like what that signals to me is like CEO founders are the best to work for because it's not just a job for Brian. This is his life's work. He cares immensely about who we're hiring. And so it's like, I don't know if other heads of talent work with their CEO on like website content, but it's like, those are the types of, leaders that you want to work for.
That's so dope, Greg. And so, okay, I said last thing before, but this is really the last thing, which is everybody asks like, oh, like I want to do talent density at my company. And let me tell you, like, what I think the answer is, and then you course correct me, which is one, just to your point around you better interview the CEO before you start at that company, because if they don't care, it never, like, it just, no one else cares. Like, you're the recruiter, you're on the recruiting team, none of the engineering managers or product people report up to you. And so, like, ultimately, like, the CEO has to care, number one. Yeah.
1,000%. 1,000%. I got my mental model. Keep going, but I can rattle off the mental
Okay.
model of what I just
Okay.
lived.
This is the story. So then the second thing is you have to be okay with an experimental culture. Like, you guys are doing things that we don't know if they're going to work. They might fail. And nobody should get in trouble when they fail. We should just be like, hey, we learn from this. We codify the learning. We take those learnings, we apply them, and we move on. Those are the two things that really come up to me that, like, no one gets right, that are the foundational things that everyone wants to do. Like, well, I want higher talent density. Well, you can't do it without these two things. Is that right?
Those are cornerstones without a doubt. Like, no disagreement there. Major cornerstones. This is my mental model, and I told you because I have Saturday morning conversations with people that, like, this is the mental model, and this is my own experience of, like, what we went through. You have to have a launch point. Like, that when I'm talking to people out there, they're like, we talk about it, but it's like, it's hard to pull the trigger and get in the game. When LJ released that blog and drew the line in the sand that we're doing that, I mean, that next morning I'm standing in front of the team going, it's go time. It's like, this is what we're going to go do. But it's like, it's hard to get in the game. So, like, that's a pivotal moment, is like, you like, make the call, get in the game. To your point, you've got to have exec sponsorship. I could, as the head of talent, I could not do this. I could not push that boulder uphill without senior leaders saying, we are doing this, end of story. And so you've got to have that exec sponsorship. There's an element of, like, the head of talent, like, you need to be very disciplined. Because when we first, like, last year, my story was, I look at my Slack at any given point in time, and I got like 180 Slacks. And it's all well intended. Like, people are learning, there are some escalations, but it's all about exceptions. Like, it's like, Greg, this was the number one referral I've ever worked with at my prior company. Like, why do they have to take an assessment, or, like, there's stuff like that. And so, but they were good nudges, but it's like, I was very disciplined of, like, you get hired at Coinbase as an FTE, you're going to go through our hiring process, end of story. But it's like, I underestimated the amount of, like, taking people with you on the journey. With my team, acknowledge that it's hard, anchor on the why. If you're trying to find these 10 Xers, it's like, celebrate it, right? Talk about it. So try to break down behaviors and traits that we're after. But that executive sponsorship's everything, because I couldn't push that boulder uphill on my own.
It just doesn't, it just never works that way. Like, I've personally dealt with it in my career when I had it, and then when I haven't had it. And when you don't have it, it is literally like Sisyphus pushing the rock up the hill. If you care more than the CEO, then, it's just going to be a continually uphill battle for you. Versus, I think the other side that people don't like, if you're not living in this every day and you haven't experienced a culture that really gives a shit about talent, and, like, the microscope is out all the time, the thing that you start to feel in that culture is like, God, get off my ass. Like, come on. And I think that's the other piece for the talent leader is, man, they have to be calloused. Like, they got to be tough, because you're getting punched in the mouth all day long from all sides.
I mean, the whole, this isn't a woe me, but it's like my Slack, like, the exceptions. The toughest thing, though, too, is towing the line with people that are superior or senior to me.
Exactly.
So I'm talking, like, people that have C in their title that would come to me and say, I don't like, this is I don't.
What the hell are we doing, Greg?
Yeah, why would we put this candidate through this, and this? Because I personally work with them and they're exceptional.
Yeah.
And so it's like, if I didn't think I've had executive sponsorship above me, I had some pretty tough conversations of, like, I hear you. We're staying the course. It's going to take time. But if you get hired at Coinbase, you're going through this process. If they're an equitable process, but it's like, those were the ones where it's like, could get you wrapped around the axle, or make you have somewhat of a bad day, or lay in bed at night going, man, what just happened? But it's like, it's stamina, it's resiliency, but it's like being grounded on, like, what we're trying to accomplish. Again, doesn't happen without Brian, Emily, and LJ saying we're doing this. And it makes me, if I'm aligned, I can toe the line all day long. If you don't have that, you probably flap it in the wind and you're pretty exposed.
Totally. And it's kind of a cheesy analogy, but, like, diamonds are made with pressure. And I truly
100%.
believe that world-class talent organizations have to have pressure on them all the time. And so it's like a, yes, you want high talent. You cannot have high talent density without pressure in the system to check and balance, to stress test it, to make sure things are working and not work. Like, and that piece right there, I'll use the word callus again. You have to develop a callus if you're the head of talent, or even if you're a recruiter on the team, because you're going to go through that fire and you're going to be forged through the fire. And so, Greg Garrison, this was an absolute blast, brother. Thank you for taking us to school.
Nolan, I'm honored to be here. Thank you, sir.